The city has always been a sanctuary city, and we've always managed those who wanted to come to New York City to pursue the American dream.
Harlem residents are accusing the city of using the bait and switch tactic on them. They tell us what was built as a luxury apartment building almost 10 years ago is now being turned into a migrant shelter.
We should have been informed. It's like they snuck in here.
Executive Director of the community outreach organization Silent Voices United, Tiffany Fulton, is not keeping her voice silent about what she says is the city blindsiding her Harlem community.
I'm looking for answers.
Last week, she snapped these photos. Crews moving furniture into a vacant 35-unit complex on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard near 130th Street, including boxes of twin bunk beds. Thursday, they were seen through windows all set up. Fulton says local leaders confirmed with her they're moving migrants here.
They're actually turning this into a sanctuary for asylum seekers.
The building was first marketed as a luxury doorman building. Condos include kitchens with granite countertops and marble bathrooms. Renderings show it even has an indoor swimming pool on its roof. But city records state its developers defaulted on loans, and for a decade, the building remained empty. And a major question area residents want answered as soon as possible: how exactly did the city even get control of the building?
No, I don't agree with it turned into a sanctuary for asylum seekers. No, when we have people right here that need the space.
While neighbors were gathering to share their concerns, Mayor Eric Adams dropped in to answer questions.
You are the mayor. We do not want to hear excuses.
But the mayor announced a change of course.
I told the team, find out what's going on here. We're not moving folks into a brand new building when you have long-term needs into a community. That's not going to happen.
The luxury building will instead be a shelter for long-term New York City families.
You will not have migrants and asylum seekers in that property.
Residents told me they're relieved for the change, but frustrated by the city's lack of transparency around opening a shelter in the first place. Many wish they had more input about the building's future.
There's new concerns about a wider criminal network involving migrants.
All right, police are linking them to a string of moped robberies here in the city, and they say they're being recruited by kingpins.
The NYPD says the criminal network is so far comprised of mostly Venezuelan migrants, and the crimes that they are committing here in the city can not only physically hurt you, but they can also wipe you out financially.
What are we looking at?
NYPD Inspector Nicholas Fiore and the Crimes Against Persons Unit have their hands full with a surge in crimes they say are being committed by a crew of Venezuelan migrants. How big of a problem is this right now in the city?
This is tremendous.
We have seen the chilling videos. One, sometimes two suspects on a moped jumping the sidewalk, yanking cell phones and jewelry from victims. A 62-year-old woman in Brooklyn was recently dragged down the sidewalk. Inspector Fiore says these types of crime patterns have nearly tripled since the migrant surge into the city.
From April of 2023 to January 2024, it was 160 patterns versus the time period the year prior when they were not in this country, it was 62 patterns.
Cell phones are a hot commodity that could wipe you out financially.
There was a tech guy in the Bronx that was able to hack into the phone in less than 3 minutes and empty your bank accounts. That money got sent to separate places from Miami to Texas.
He says the phones are then shipped to Colombia and Venezuela.
You could then take that phone and sell it for $1,000, $1,500.
Fiore calls it a sophisticated operation that is orchestrated from outside the U.S.
The estimated cost for caring for migrants this year, including providing shelter, health care, and transitioning them into their own housing, is estimated to be $321 million. That's according to the governor and the Cook County Board president, who today announced a plan to cover $250 million of that.
So I'm grateful of the work from the state as well as from the county and the work that they have done and what they are committed to continuing to do.
But when the mayor was asked about the city committing to fund the remaining $71 million needed for migrant care, he repeatedly dodged the questions.
There are a lot of things to consider in this entire operation. It's not just financial resources. I'm committed to this mission as I've been. And I'm grateful that we have partners at the state level and the county level who are also committed to this mission.
If we could get an answer to whether $71 million will be committed by the city for this part of the mission after the state and the county committed theirs. The mayor did not answer that question, instead pivoting to talk about the overall operation. The governor saying in a statement, it is clear the state, county, and city will have to do more to keep people safe. And Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle adding, we cannot wait for additional resources. Mayor Johnson, after being pressed numerous times by reporters, suggesting that he was counting on the city's $71 million portion of this year's migrant funding to come from the feds.
But the goal is to ultimately challenge the federal government to do its part, because local municipalities are not designed and built to be able to hold this type of operations.
The current crisis continues to cause tensions in Chicago's neighborhoods. North Side residents are calling out Mayor Johnson and City Hall, saying officials are not being open about long-term plans for the temporary migrant shelter in the Edgewater community.
That temporary shelter is here at Broadway Armory Park in Edgewater, where most Park District community programs were moved to other neighborhood facilities in order to make room for asylum seekers back in August.
I mean, you could ask anybody, in this neighborhood, do they know what's going on? No.
Ed Nelson and others we talked to demanding transparency and the 6-month evaluation that Edgewater residents say they were promised by the city back in the summer.
We're kind of beating around the bush. We really want to sit down. We have a meeting on the 21st with our work group.
Lifelong Edgewater resident Hussein Mohammed and other members of the Broadway Armory Park Council eager to meet with the Chicago Park District to see what classes and programs can be restored to the benefit of both Edgewater residents, Mohammed says, and asylum seekers.
A disturbing arrest in the north suburbs where a woman is being charged with human trafficking. Officials say that she forced migrants into jobs to pay off so-called debt.
The allegations truly disturbing. Investigators here in Lake County say the woman charged in this case, identified as Gladys Ibanez Olea, entrapped 4 migrants, all who were from Mexico, and forced 3 of them into jobs and, in some cases, withheld food from them. Highland Park police were first tipped off about a potential human trafficking case happening inside this home in the 500 block of Onwentzia Avenue last month. Then on February 7th, a search warrant was issued where law enforcement officials with the Lake County Sheriff's Department, Highland Park Police, and Homeland Security raided the home, rescuing a 19-year-old woman and her 2-year-old son, along with a 22-year-old woman and her 15-year-old brother. Investigators say Olea had arranged for the 4 to be illegally escorted into the U.S. last summer. She promised them housing and safety and jobs, but soon after they arrived, she is accused of confiscating their IDs, money, and other possessions. She then allegedly forced the 2 adults and 15-year-old into jobs, having them work off what they call debt that gradually grew to a point they would never be able to pay.
Thousands of migrants spending what could be their final weeks in shelters across Chicago as the city's eviction deadline looms. Like Lisbeth Velasquez, a Venezuelan migrant who says she fled due to political persecution 6 months ago and is now nearing the end of her 60-day limit in the city's shelters.
Dice que tengo fecha de salida para el 1 de abril. ¿Qué va a pasar si yo de aquí al 1 de abril yo no consigo una vivienda? Estoy trabajando, no tengo recursos económicos para pagar una vivienda.
Velasquez says she's navigating the asylum process, but that she won't be able to obtain a work permit until well after her eviction date.
A last-ditch effort for Denver to help the migrants here might be hiring them to directly work for the city. The Biden administration has warned state governments against hiring people who are here without federal work permits. But today, Democratic Senator John Hickenlooper told our Mark Salinger, with Congress not being willing to help, it could be Denver's only option.
Yeah, Kyle, it's not even certain that cities can legally hire migrants to work for the city themselves. In fact, Senator Hickenlooper told me today that it might lead to the federal government to take legal action against the city. Still, he said that we're at a point where there really are no other good options. Hickenlooper was in town meeting with Mayor Mike Johnston and nonprofits about the migrant crisis and talking with migrants who'd made it to Denver. He says there's still hope for some sort of federal action to allow migrants to work for maybe a couple months or so. Though about 30 seconds later down that question, he also admitted that there is no actual plan or bill that could pass Congress to do that. That leads us to where we are right now, with the senator acknowledging that cities may have to hire migrants themselves, regardless of legal consequences.
I think at a certain point, if the federal government doesn't act, local communities are going to have to. They're going to have to figure out some way. It's out. You can work now if you're going to be in Aurora. If you're going to be in Arapahoe County, you're going to have a 6-month working permit, and if the federal government wants to come down and throw the book at us, we'll deal with the legal costs.
A Denver motel that has been providing shelter to hundreds of migrants for the past few months will be shutting down at the end of this month.
I miss my family.
Young Prince says she had been feeling lost and painfully lonely after the deaths of her husband and her son.
I used to be fixed to them breakfast and lunch, dinner.
But she recently found a new purpose in her life, helping newcomers with food and housing.
These people call me Mama, and I help them.
Con la señora John, para nosotros es como una madre.
Her hotel has become a sanctuary for dozens of migrants who had no other place to go.
Una bendición de Dios.
But their stay at the Western Motor Inn is soon coming to an end.
En realidad estamos un poco preocupados.
This after the property was recently sold, leaving the future of these families up in the air.
Just as a city, we want to do things differently.
While Denver helps migrants find work, Aurora city leaders are taking a stand, refusing to support people who are bused into the city without a prior agreement.
The resolution was presented at today's council meeting and will now move forward for a study session debate.
The resolution saying the city is proud of its identity as the most diverse and global city in our state. But a few council members making it clear that they don't want to deal with the influx of migrants and homeless in the same way as the city of Denver.
We are not going to cut our police budget. We are not taking anything out, and that includes staff resources.
That was Aurora City Council member Danielle Jurinsky defending Aurora's stance on not using city resources to support migrants and homeless bussed in from other municipalities. Jurinsky and council member Steve Sundberg co-sponsoring this resolution, which says Aurora will not foot the bill for the influx of people coming in unless there's a prior agreement to cover the costs.
We have a fiscal responsibility to our citizens, residents, that we have to live within our means, and we can't overpromise and underdeliver.
The mayor's office asked every single department within the city to try and make some sort of budget cut in their budgets for this year. We are talking about everything from the Department of Housing Stability to Denver's office of the clerk and recorder. That office was asked to cut about $1 million, and I spoke to the clerk and recorder about that. He said it's simply a hard no from him. Listen.
We can't do it. We absolutely can't do it. There's no possible way and no scenario in which we can run an election in 2024, 4 elections, including a presidential election, and be able to maintain the same level of service, the same level of excellence, without that impacting our bottom line.
Lopez says his office needs that money to make sure it has, one, the personnel to run those elections that we have left the rest of this year. The department also has to maintain the equipment it uses for elections. They've got to make sure they have things like cameras on boxes and so much more. Though, like I mentioned, they aren't the only department that was asked to deal with this and make those cuts. I reached out to several others. Denver's district attorney's office was asked to cut 5% of its 2024 budget, which is more than $44 million. That would mean cutting about $2.2 million this year. The Department of Human Services was also asked to do the same, and though they don't have a specific number just yet, a spokesperson told me they've already had to divert about $15 million from the revitalization of the building they're currently in toward the Migrant Response Fund. And Nicole, I also reached out to Denver's Department of Transportation, DPD, Denver's Department of Public Safety, and so many others. They told me they don't have a specific number yet, some of them even saying that they won't have a number for at least a couple of months.
It's been 2 weeks since the Melnea Cash Recreational Community Center in Roxbury was converted into an emergency shelter for migrant families. Hundreds of beds now cover the indoor track and soccer fields where neighborhood children like 12-year-old Jeremiah Rodriguez thought he had baseball practice this weekend.
We usually practice.
And what happened when you went here today?
They were closed.
Dozens of migrant families sleeping at Logan Airport and hundreds in overflow shelters like this one at Melnia Cass. But those locations do not include the thousands of homeless and migrants living in hotels and motels. So just how much money is the state paying for lodging? Records obtained by the I-Team show the state has 17 contracts for housing, totaling more than $116 million. Those contracts are only for fiscal year 2024 and end in June.
This is something that we have been asking the administration for information on for better part of a year, and have been stonewalled on the information. So I think for you to get it, I think it's really important.
In some cases, the hotels are collecting money from the state for 3 meals a day, $16 for breakfast, $17 for lunch, and $31 for dinner. That means $64 a day per person. The state's right to shelter law requires it provide families with refrigeration and basic cooking facilities. But some of the accommodations do not have those appliances, leaving the state to contract out for food and delivery. Citing the emergency nature of the crisis, the state gave Spinelli Ravioli Manufacturing Company in East Boston a $10 million 6-month no-bid contract to provide meals and delivery services. Spinelli's tells the I-Team, as an approved state vendor, we have the ability to deliver emergency meals and mobilize quickly. We are not the exclusive meal vendor and do not have a guaranteed contract beyond this initial emergency period. We are currently in the bid process and are looking forward to continue to aid the state to reach their goals. Spinelli's contract with the state runs through the end of March. Senator Peter Durant says these contracts are just the tip of the iceberg on the overall cost of the crisis.
The mass health costs, the educational costs, and that's the concern. Is the money has to come from somewhere, and so there's only really 2 options, right? You either raise taxes or you cut services.
Elections have consequences.